everyone, and welcome to week 7 of Unit 2, the response essay. So as you'll see, starting this week, we're going to be testing out different forms of communication via lecture and video formats, as I've received some feedback from some of you so far from the surveys that the PowerPoint format either may not be working or it's just not your preferred format, and that's perfectly acceptable. I'm open to testing out different formats of lecturing. So we're going to try to upload videos to YouTube. That seems to be the most accessible way to make sure all of you can watch the lectures. So we're going to test that out starting with week 7. So this week, we are going to be focusing on multi-sided argumentation. I'm going to share my screen with you. Yes, so this week, our objectives are to apply multi-sided argumentative strategies, rebuttal and concession strategies as well, to an argument. So we are scaffolding, building upon last week's week 6 learning materials. So last week, all of you were still tentatively deciding what kind of thesis claim you might want to choose. So remember, there are 3 types of thesis claim for the response essay. That is an agree and disagree or agree and disagree response claim. And now based upon that, you are going to start incorporating what kind of argumentation strategies you want to include in your argument to make it the most successful response essay it can be. Now we're going to review your assignments for this week. And I know this looks like quite a bit, but it's actually broken up throughout 2 weeks. So for this week, please watch the instructor video, the week 7 instructor video. Read in your Top Hat textbook multi-sided argumentative strategies, rebuttal strategies, concession, and you might also want to review entering the conversation section. For this week, assignments due are drafting multi-sided argument strategies. That is due Wednesday, September 30th. You also have your first workshop for this essay due on Friday, October 2nd. By 11:59 p.m. to Canvas. Here, I wrote that wrong. So for this assignment, you will need at least 2.5 pages minimum of a draft. So please submit that. For these essays, to explain the workshops in a bit more detail, I usually don't have you submit a full draft yet, and that is in case you decide you might want to go in a different direction by the time you actually submit your essay. So just to clarify some of that confusion, this is why I only have you submit at least half of your essay for workshops and not the full draft. So submit half of your essay, 2.5 pages minimum by Friday. And then that following Monday by 11:59 p.m., that is when your peer reviews are going to be due. So you'll have the entire weekend plus Monday, all of Monday, to complete your peer reviews. So peer reviews due October 5th. And then that next Friday, so 2 weeks from now, I believe, October 9th, 11:59 p.m., that is when your Unit 2 presentation draft is due. So again, presentation just means the first draft. That is when your Unit 2 response essay is due. And then Unit 1 revisions. So I am just about done with grading those, and I should be returning them to you this weekend. So as far as guidelines, for the Unit 1 revision, please watch the video, Unit 1 Essay Revision Guidelines. This can be found under week 4 and week 7. Your Unit 1 essays are due 1 week from the date I release the grades back to you. And this date will be reflected in the email I sent out to you, as well as the assignment created. And you will submit your revisions to Revision of Unit 1 Rhetorical Evaluation. And then finally, 2 other assignments, minor ones. You have your extra credit survey that I have provided all of you for feedback, because I want to hear from all of you how you're doing in this course, how you feel about it, etc. So this is an extra credit survey. This is due October 2nd. There's also an anonymous mid-semester evaluation. I would very much appreciate it if you could also fill that out. This is as opposed to the extra credit survey, so I know who's turning it in, and that provides a bit more personal feedback, so I know how to interact with each and every one of you, since I don't get to meet in person again with all of you every day during class. This is an anonymous survey where you can provide feedback about the course if you desire to. So please, if you have the opportunity, fill that out as well. All right, and as far as the course material for this week, we're going to start discussing that now. So we are first going to start with essay organization. And I briefly touched upon this last week. So how should you structure a response essay? So let's start off with the introduction. What should the introduction look like? So in the response essay, you are responding to an argument. Oh, sorry, we had a share screen moment. It went back. Yes, so in a response essay, you are responding to an already pre-written argument. So either Keller's or Devadas's argument, which means you need to incorporate some of their claims in your argument. However, most of the argument is going to be your claims, your research, and your explanation and examination of that research. So basically, using the introduction as context, you're going to first provide background information of the issue you were discussing. So let's say you were discussing STEM, for example. You're discussing, and this is relevant to both essays, both articles somewhat, because they discuss technological issues and the STEM field of STEM. So let's say you were discussing the STEM field. You might provide some background about STEM versus the humanities in your introduction, some background about the issues going on with it and the field, what has developed so far, just depending on what your claim type is and what specific issue you're addressing. Remember to be as specific as you can, whichever claim you're addressing. And then you're going to move into addressing and responding directly to the author's claim, so Devadas's or Keller's. So then you're going to briefly provide a summary of the author's or article's main claims and reasoning. So again, a brief intro background and then brief summary of the article's or author's main claims. And then you're going to provide your thesis after that. So this is all within the intro. It can either be a paragraph or 2 paragraphs. And then, so your thesis is going to be in response to Keller Devadas's main claim that I, XYZ. So based on your thesis, agree, disagree, or agree and disagree, you're going to state what you agree, disagree, etc. with. So as it states on here, you're going to provide a blueprint statement of what your readers should expect in a response argument. So as far as what the majority of your essay should look like, this is the body of your essay. There are 3 main areas, and this can be split up between the different paragraphs. So you're going to provide your position, summarize alternative or opposing views, and rebut or concede these alternative or opposing views. So basically, again, you're splitting these up throughout the various paragraphs or however you want to structure your argument. This also depends on your response claim. And later in this video, I'm going to go through an example of a student essay with you to show you how to apply this organization in your essay. So yes, depending upon what response claim you have, the organization is going to be different for each claim. But just generally, and when you provide your position, you want to Provide your stance on the issue. Make it clear that you are responding to certain aspects of the author's argument. Which claims are you responding to? You might pull out specific quotes that they stated, specific positions they had in their argument. And then when you summarize alternative or opposing views, this is part of multi-sided argumentation. You are going to anticipate objections from your readers or others who have a stake in the issue. Fairly summarize views that are different from yours. So basically, remember that you are addressing a neutral audience. So as I discussed last week and the week prior, a neutral audience means you could have an audience that either wholeheartedly believes your stance and your perspective on the issue, or one that is highly skeptical of your issue. You don't know. So you have to cover all your bases in this argument, in your response essay, which means that you have to, in addition to providing your perspective on the issue, your position, you also have to provide evidence and acknowledgement of another audience's perspective on the issue, just in case, to cover all your bases on the issue. Make it a well-rounded argument. However, because again, it's your argument, your claim, and you want to support your position as best you can and strengthen it, after you acknowledge these alternative and opposing views, you are going to rebut or concede to these alternative or opposing views. So for example, you might concede that these points are strong and reasonable, and that whoever said them, that either the author you were responding to or you found some evidence that brought these points up, they had a strong point and that you really can't argue against them. You might just concede, yes, they have a strong point. And you might move on and say, that's true. However, I still agree with my stance and I hold firm to it, hold true to it. And I'm going to continue to argue in favor of it. That's one way to use concession in your argument. Or you can use rebuttal. You can also use both. However, rebuttal is, once you acknowledge those views, you say along the lines of, however, I acknowledge that they have a strong argument or that they have a good point, but here's my evidence and my reasoning for why I see their argument, but I ultimately agree with my argument more so. I'm still in favor with my argument and I still believe it's the strongest one. So that's a brief summary of rebuttal and concession. And then finally, you have your conclusion. So always have a strong conclusion. So in your conclusion, you should summarize your overall main argument. Always, always, always restate your thesis claim. This enhances your own credibility, your own ethos. You also want to, in order to, again, enhance your own ethos as the writer, because now you are making your own argument in response to someone else's. This is referred to as entering the conversation. You want to state your final stances on the subject in addition to your response claim. So after writing this entire argument, what are your final thoughts? Encourage your readers to act. What do you want them to take away from this argument? That's what you should consider to include in your conclusion. And then here, this is a list of, again, a summary, what rebuttal and concession is. So you want to make your argument as strong as possible, demonstrate in your essay that you have at least considered the opposing argument that the audience might make against your claim. With concession and rebuttal, you acknowledge the strength of an alternative or opposing argument, which is concession. Then you might pivot back to your viewpoint, examining how your viewpoint is a stronger argument in this case and providing evidence to support it. This is referred to as rebuttal. So now that we have a brief background of that, we're going to move on to examining how an author uses rebuttal and concession strategies, multi-sided strategies, in a student example essay. So just before we do that, we're going to keep in mind the key points you want to include when writing your own response essay for Unit 2. So in your response essay, you want to provide a brief background about the conversation and the original article's ideas. You definitely want to include this in your introduction, so a summary of the author's original ideas. You also want to refer back to occasionally the author's argument, and I'll show you where this occurs in the student example. Address a neutral or undecided audience in a fair and respectful manner. So again, this is tone. Engage the audience with a neutral tone. You can still assert your claim, but make sure it's with a fair and slightly objective stance. Present a focused claim with reasons that respond directly to the ideas in the original argument. Develop your claim and reasons by presenting and responding to ideas from the original argument. So this is referring to using resources. Remember, for this essay, you need to include at least a minimum of at least 2 outside resources. So please do that. You can use more than 2, and I highly encourage it. As you see, these essays in your textbook, these are successful essays, are considered highly successful essays. They use more than 2 sources, and I encourage each of you to do so. And then finally, you want to develop your argument by presenting alternative opposing views and handling those views in an effective manner. So somewhere in your essay, to at least make it a passable essay, you need to use multi-sided strategies at least once. So a form of concession and rebuttal at least once in your argument. All right, so the student example that I took from your Top Hat textbook, and that's where you can find it in there as well, we're going to analyze together is a response to the myth of police reform by Coates. And as you'll see in this essay, I've already kind of pre-outlined it with color coding to make it easier to explain to you some of the places we're going to review. So in red underline, this is a response to the source article and the student's thesis statement. So the student's thesis statement for this essay is agree and disagree claim. In yellow, this is the student stating their claims in response to Coates' argument and their claims. In green, this is the types of evidence that the student uses. And you might want to pause this video and read the essay before I analyze it for you, as I am going to skim through it with the assumption that you have read the essay. So again, I encourage you to read through it because I'm not going to read it word for word. Okay, so starting with the introduction, this is the introduction. This student, whose name is Mary, yes, Mary, is responding to the article called The Myth of Police Reform by Coates. And she states where it was published, the date it was published, and she summarizes Coates' main claim. So Coates' main claim is that the real issue is that people believe police are always well equipped when in fact their skill set only effectively facilitates the use of force. Yet we still send them in to de-escalate problems they may not be trained to understand. She states Coates' main claim. And then directly after that, the student provides her response claim to Coates' argument. So in response, I agree with Coates' claim that police should not be deployed to solve every situation. And then she states, as an agree and disagree claim, the other half of her thesis, but I disagree with Coates' points that body cameras and direct officer accountability are not steps in the right direction. And then that ends her thesis. So this is how she starts her introduction. And as you see, right before she introduces the summary of Coates' main claim and her thesis, she also includes a brief introduction of the issue that she is discussing in this article. So some students like to break this up into 2 separate paragraphs and discuss the article more in depth. in the second paragraph, it just depends on your preference and what you think will strengthen your essay the most. Okay, and then moving on to the second section. So we said yellow was the student stating their claim in response to Coates' argument and or his main claims. So we see here, Coates' primary overarching claim in his article is that police officers are not equipped to appropriately handle every situation they are sent to fix because, and then she states Coates' one point in which Coates is making a primary claim in his argument. And then she states right after that, a point in which I wholeheartedly agree. So she's directly stating with which main claim or specific aspect of Coates' article she agrees with. And then after that, then we have some editing issues, so I'll just redraw this. After that, she provides some evidence to support why she agrees with Coates' claim. So here, we see the evidence she provides is some direct testimony. So she provides evidence of her father, Ken Windsor, who was a police officer for the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department for 27 years. She also states that he provided something called the Critical Incident Training Program, etc. And she goes through his personal testimony, providing direct quotes. And then at the end of this, she states, now that she has this information, I would still counter with Coates' ideas, even though she said, I agree with them. I would still counter with Coates' idea that this mindset is actually a sign of a concerning problem in the criminal justice system. So 2 things to note in this paragraph. The first, she has an agree and disagree claim. So she's going back and forth in her argument, which means she has to show why she agrees with Coates' claim and provide evidence to support it. But she also has to show why she disagrees and where she disagrees with Coates' claim, what aspect she's going to counter with Coates' claim. So that's why this paragraph is both agreeing and countering, disagreeing with Coates' claim. And the second thing to note in this paragraph is the type of evidence that Mary uses in her essay. She uses a form of personal testimony. Now she cites her father as testimony, and testimony is okay to use if you pull it from a source article for this essay. However, I wouldn't encourage it if it's not from a source article, just because it's usually not the most reliable unless you're a profession in that field, unless you've had, as she states, her father had 30 years of experience. If this is your case and you want to include that, I also need you to include another minimum of 2 outside resources, so i.e. other articles, peer-reviewed journals, whatever you want to use, etc. So written sources, in addition to that personal testimony if you want to include that as evidence. All right, moving on to this next section. And I made a note here. So in the beginning, she starts this next section with, last year in Oklahoma City, 35-year-old Sanchez was shot and killed at his own home by police officers. So how could the writer improve this transition with a stronger topic sentence? It's probably not the strongest transition sentence. She might have started out with either Coates' claim in this article that she's addressing or responding to. She might have not started with this example that she's going to directly analyze in this essay. So even though this essay is a successful essay, it still has areas for improvement. Okay, and then, yes. So here we have another kind of evidence she uses down here halfway through. Another example cited in David Perry's article, 4 Disabled People Dead in Another Week of Police Brutality, published in The Nation. So this is a form of data from internet research. This is one kind of evidence she uses. And then the other type of evidence she cited was when Sanchez was shot. That is known as news or public knowledge evidence. And so I'm just pointing out different kinds of evidence to use so you know what evidence is available to use and incorporate in your essay. Okay, here we see her again directly responding to Coates' article. So what Coates is calling for is the reframing of police work. He encourages the idea that police should simply be removed from as many situations as possible. And while anyone could easily counter that the solutions just set up for more risk of crime and unsafety in communities, I would argue that the biggest concern of any community should be ensuring that everyone has equal civil rights. So here we see how she isn't necessarily disagreeing with Coates. She is kind of agreeing with Coates, actually, and she's inserting herself in the conversation. She is further adding to Coates' conversation and building upon it. So we see her directly responding to Coates' claim. So she states Coates' claim, and then she states her own claim in response to it. And then here we have another example of some evidence she uses, a study conducted by Stanford University and analyzing traffic stops. This is a poll or a survey, so another type of evidence. And then here, this is probably the most important paragraph in her essay. This is her transition paragraph. So her transition from agree to disagree claim. This might also be referred to as her rebuttal or concession paragraph, possibly. So here she states, Coates, again, one of his main claims, and then she states, he believes that they are a tool to avoid a deeper conversation about the major flaws of the criminal justice system. And while I agree that body cameras are absolutely not a solution, I would disagree with Coates that they are not an important step in the right direction because X, Y, Z. And then she states her opinion. So here you can really focus on how the writer situates herself into an already existing argument. She interacts with Coates really well right here in this argument, directly responding to him in this sentence while also inserting her own claims and her own voice. So this is what you want to try to imitate also in your response essay. And you might look to this essay and this sentence as an example if you find you're having difficulty, especially if you're doing a agree and disagree claim with a transition essay. And then we have more kinds of evidence at the end. She just cites a general article. And then down here, you'll see after citing that evidence, Mary somewhat provides a form of counter argument. That's what I wrote with CA. So why police departments at the moment lack comprehensive guidance for proper structured use of recording devices. This tool has the capacity to be employed nationwide and encourage more understanding of proper law enforcement practices. So again, assuming you have read this essay because I'm skimming through it, this will make sense if you read through it and understand Coates' argument. She is providing a form of counter argument here to Coates' claims. And then finally, here in the conclusion, she restates her thesis. While I disagree with Coates, and then she states a specific portion of his argument, I agree completely with his overall claim and believe his call for a more restrained criminal justice system. In order to ensure everyone, no matter their physical or mental ability, socioeconomic status or race is treated with equal rights in criminal situations. The reform should not begin and end with the police themselves, but should rather run deep into the roots of unjust practices in the criminal justice system as a whole. So in the end, you see she restates her thesis and provides somewhat of a call to action. She leaves the audience with a final thought of how they might respond to this article, how they should respond if presented with a similar issue. And that ends our lessons and review of our week 7 materials for multi-sided argumentation strategies. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me, email me, or visit me during office hours.